Hello. Now, Section 2 of the Code of Ethics for Nigerian Journalists states that the public has a right to know, and as such, journalists are required to engage in factual, accurate, balanced, and fair reporting, which is the ultimate objective of good journalism and the basis of earning public trust and confidence. This presupposes that the media and journalists have to strive for objectivity and balance as a way of maintaining the crucial place in society. But how objective has the Nigerian media been in reporting events in the current country? And to what extent has ownership, control, and other considerations affected the objectivity of the Nigerian media? Is the concept of objectivity really attainable or a mere wish? I am Joy Usiagwe, and this is Nigeria Today. Thanks for joining us as we examine the Nigerian media and objective reporting. Joining us to discuss the Nigerian media and objective reporting are two seasoned journalists. We have the #1 journalist in Nigeria talking about the national president of the Nigerian Union of Journalists, Abdulwahid Udushile. Good to have you join us, sir.
Thank you, John.
Also in the studio is Mr. Christian Ogodo. He's a broadcast journalist. Thanks for joining us in
Thank
the
you
studio.
very much, Joy.
Now, gentlemen, let's start this way. Let's look at the concept of media objectivity. I'll start with you, Mr. President. Is it a reality or a myth?
Well, let me go back to probably when we were in school, journalism school. That's something we were taught, objectivity. That's itself clearly shows that there cannot be total objectivity in everything you're doing, because the objectivity is subjected to certain things. What you know, your background, your views will also one way or the other affect the output. But then there are some parameters that you just have to bring into play when you are having your story. So we can't say totally you can be 100% objective, but then you need to be. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
Yes, okay, let me move to you, Mr. Christian Obodo. What is your take on the issue of objectivity?
Well, I think very sincerely that the Nigerian media or reporter can be objective, because it's the first basic knowledge that you acquire when you're being, taught about communication or journalism. Because if there is no objectivity, that reporter or a news medium is capable of causing anarchy, chaos, insurrection, by what today is now regarded as hate speech or hate reporting or jaundice reporting. Don't forget that in the time past we talked about yellow journalism or the green page journalism, whichever way you want to look at it, whether from the private sector or from the government point of view. Objectivity is sincerely the way to go, because of the crucial and critical roles that the media, have to disseminate information, whether government is doing well or not, but for the generality of the people to be informed, to be educated, and to be entertained. So objectivity is paramount.
Well, we'll still stay on this particular question, and I would like to make reference to an international journalist and what he said, and then we'll juxtapose it with the Nigerian situation, and I would like you to still go back to this question to see if it is total. Now, I want to quote him so you can hear.
Please go ahead, yeah.
His name is Nick Yandel, and they asked him a question: is media reporting objective? Now let me quote. He says, no, and it can never be. all media production is shaped by a process of selection and omission. Leaving in what is important and leaving out that which is not is one of the primary functions of a journalist when writing news. And this decision making is always going to be informed by a set of values. And as soon as we make a decision based on values, we can no longer claim to be objective. End of quote.
I don't think, sincerely, I don't think he's deviated from what objectivity is, because he's not talking about subjectivity here. If he has, mentioned that ownership ideology comes to play an important role in the kind of purview, focus, direction of such an organization. Take the NTA, for example. Take the BBC, for example. These are government organs to disseminate information representing the viewpoint of their government and, the people. Would you now say that if the NTA, for example, carries stories about government functions and the rest, like the security architecture that has been taking place, would you say they are being subjective? No. What this man has just simply said, or the president tried to explain, yes, at the base of objectivity, the subjective nature that will come in would depend on the ownership ideology. In the United Kingdom, for example, where I trained, and maybe in South Africa, but I'll take the United Kingdom, you get the point. Even at the BBC or at Sky or ITV and the rest, they have an agenda. Any news organization must have its agenda each day. Besides the daily agenda, you have news organizations there that are politically inclined.
All right, let me go to
let me just add this. I think the guy just explained what I was telling you about. You see, whatever you do is affected by your environment, by your own worldview, what you know. Like I was just trying to say, for instance, the way a reporter in Nigeria will look at an issue might be different from the way a reporter from the UK, from South Africa, will look at the same issue. Now to a Nigerian now, if, let's take the insurgency in the Northeast, or the Niger Delta crisis. A foreign reporter will come in and see it differently and will still claim to be objective.
Now, in other words, are you saying that reportage in Nigeria is based or hangs around values in the society?
No, I'm not talking about Nigeria. It's everywhere in the world. You see, it's what you know.
But let's come back home now, because we're looking at the Nigerian media.
Yeah, the media is basically the same all over the world. Mm-hmm. We operate under the same thing, the rules and ethics. We are the same thing. Journalism is universal. Mm-hmm. Now, but when you now apply it to your environment, now that's when your experience, your upbringing, the society will determine what we do. See, I've always been saying this thing. The Nigerian journalist is a product of Nigerian society. So if there's anything wrong with the Nigerian society, you can also get it from the Nigerian journalists. So we cannot behave outside of our environment. But there are some basic rules that must be obeyed. When we talk about fairness, fairness is fairness. It doesn't have any other interpretation.
Okay, let me go to you, Mr. Chris. You know, some people have accused Nigerian journalists of being biased. Would you accept that assertion?
No, I wouldn't. Maybe such people are just consigned, to the new media that is already fading and losing its value. If you ask me, the advanced or developed world are going back to the traditional media. If you read the author of Fire and Fury on Trump, then you would, understand what I'm saying. When you talk of, in advertising, we'll talk of brand loyalists, you get the point. I would always wake up in the morning and pick XYZ newspapers, you know. I don't want to advertise them so that even my president wouldn't say I'm biased because I know where it's coming from. So the Nigerian journalists know is very objective, very critical, even in a multiplicity of environment with the religiosity, ethnicity, and, you know, the everyday jingoist that goes into the average Nigerian life.
Mr. Abuai, let me take on a part. We're still staying on this same topic because some people will say he who pays the piper dictates the tune. And if you look at the print media in particular, you find out that that happens all the time. How would you defend that? Will you say like, that is objectivity?
No. See, it used to be like that. It used to be. But you see, I'm from print. I know what I'm talking about. There's no publisher that will come to the newsroom and say, this is the way you write a story, don't do this or don't do that. Nobody sets the rules like that way. For instance, if something has happened, there's no way, you can't put you can't slant a story in a particular way.
But ownership still facilitates objectivity. There are certain papers you see, you can already tell where they're going with the story.
See, you don't. You need to look. Look at the newspaper. Yeah. There are some newspapers in Nigeria today that are basically politics. So we call that. We say they are biased. They have chosen their audience. You see, they have chosen the niche that they want in that context. This is what we want to behave. We have newspapers in Nigeria that are known for business reporting, that they have chosen that. Will you say they are biased?
But it depends on the issue they're handling. And Mr. Christian, in our society, like Nigeria, there is a multicultural society where we report based on interest towards ethnicity and some other lines. Would you say we're being objective in our reportage?
Absolutely. We are, because I'm coming from the point of a reporter, from the point of my education in journalism. There must be ethics, except somebody who just jumped into the profession for want of what to do. Yes, we see a lot of that today, even in the traditional media, whether electronics or print. Let me come back to the issue of ownership ideology. Particularly whether in the private or government, owned media organizations, they have a direction. What the president of the NUJ is trying to say, my president is trying to say, is that some media organizations kowtow the rightist ideology, some the leftist ideology, some could be a centrist ideology. That is, taking the two and balancing the situation. Yes, certain views some could express in an extreme, very extreme form, maybe from informed opinion, or the opinions may not be so informed. It depends on the person who is dissecting the issue to reach, a correct aggregation. And where do you separate bias from now? It is balance, objectivity of that report. Have you taken, the two sides of a story? That's what we're, fairness in journalism.
How do you pick truth in being fair? What is the definition of fairness? Because it's becoming relative.
It's when you give everybody a voice.
Okay, let's hear.
Let me. This CNN popular CNN presenter, Christian Amon Paul, says something about, I don't care about, as long as I present the facts. As long as I present the facts. You see, if the facts are correct, because facts are sacred, that's what we are told in journalism.
Absolutely.
Facts are sacred. Opinion is free. You can say anything, it's your opinion. But when the facts are there, for goodness sake, if I'm pursuing a story that probably affects you and affects him, I give you equal chance. You refuse to give me your own facts, and he gave me his own, and they are presented. You now accuse me of being biased? I've given you enough opportunity to state your own case. You see, the reporter is after the facts, is after information. But you see, the problem with people who consume what we give out in this country is that they look at it from just one perspective. How does it affect me?
All right, we'll still come back to the issue of facts. We'll take a break now. This is Nigeria Today on NT News 24. We are discussing Nigerian media and objective reporting. Let's take a look at what Nigerians are saying, talking about the perception of the Nigerian media and objectivity.
It's a lot of arguments on the public that social medias or medias rather don't really report the actual story. But until you go to all these platforms, this network platform, then you hear more details on that. So I think to an extent they're not being too straightforward.
I would suggest that in a situation like this, I want the media to get accurate information before they will report, so that when they say A, it becomes A. When they say B, it becomes B.
What I think they should do, they should be more objective in their reports, be more sincere, not favor anybody when they are giving their reports. I think that's what I think they can do to improve more.
If I buy a newspaper now, I bought it, every information I'm reading is totally from media to me. But if it is one on Facebook, on the one on social media, Instagram, it's not totally, because anybody goes there and posts whatever they like, either false or true. But the one that are within their control, they should test the integrity of the information they are dispersing to the public.
Nigerian media, as it is today, is being controlled by the government. And you, including you guys, almost virtually 90% of the population of this country, they get their authentic news outside the country. Maybe they said in the CNN or BBC.
They should not put any fear in their mind. How they see the news, whatever they observe in this government or whatever anything, they have to say it at the way they see it. Don't add or don't reduce. Understand? They are trying.
Thanks for staying with us. It's still Nigeria Today, and we're looking at the Nigerian media and objective reporting. Gentlemen, you listen to the ordinary Nigerians there, and from what they're saying, I want to hear your views, especially when you consider the fact that media has gone to the marketplace, and we have so many people online reporting at the same time as traditional media. What's your take on the Vox Pop, Mr. Aduwaye?
Journalism, let me state this. Journalism is processed information. Let's be clear about that. Processed information. What you see on the social media, the so-called social media, they don't process anything. They just get information from wherever. It's in the air.
And that's as a result of media convergence.
Oh, well.
So what do we do?
I don't think the media is converging there, because a lot of those bloggers, or what are they called, and those who post stories,
they are just rumor-mongers.
They are no journalists.
Mr. Christian, that is the reality of our time, and people go there for information.
No. The reality is changing.
It's changing now.
Joy,
okay,
you aren't going to source. The NTA isn't going to source its news information from online.
But the public is going there.
No, not the public. You aren't going to source that.
Of course.
I mean, reporting Africa, reporting the world with your network and the rest, you have all your reporters everywhere. Whether it's in Mambila Plateau, whether it's in Jos Plateau, or whether it's in, down south. You get your reporters with audio and video to get the truism of a story. So how do I believe somebody who is posting hate, speeches, no way to authenticate the story on social media? Why would I believe that person? That's why I told you. I said the traditional media in the advanced country is back, and social media news, is dying. Why? Because of authenticity of the stories. You heard it from the Vox Pop, the Nigerian media, the Nigerian reporter, they are great in the dissemination of information to continually inform, educate, and entertain the people. There is no media organization that is regulated either by the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission for the electronic media or the NPC that will allow jaundiced journalism. Don't forget the kind of roles the Nigerian media has played, whether pre-colonial, post-colonial, or post-independent, during the jackboot autocracy of the military rule to democracy.
All right.
The Nigerian media is a champion of the people. You can't take that away.
Fair enough. Let's go back to the president now. Let's look at the issue of politics and politicians. You know, the area we're in now. Now, politicians are known to be desperate in trying to get into the minds of Nigerians and can try to use up objective reportage. What should we do as journalists and reporters to curb this?
It's to put our foot firmly on the ground. Remain faithful to the ethics of the profession. Once you do that, the politicians will think twice before they come to you. I've always been saying this thing, especially when the issue of this hate speech and all what have you ever come up, that you are not under any obligation to report any story if you think it's not good enough to be reported. If somebody comes on air, if a governor, a pastor, or an imam, or a traditional ruler, whoever, all these opinion leaders, just because they say anything anyhow, believing that they will be published or they'll go on, they'll be aired. But as journalists, we have a responsibility to our audience, either readers or
viewers. Now that brings me to the issue of welfare, because some people will tell you that some journalists are poorly paid, and that is why they tend
that is not an excuse.
Even some politicians know that, and that's why they take advantage of some of these journalists that are not well paid.
No, Joy, listen. That is not an excuse to do what is not right. It's not an excuse. And I can defend Nigerian journalists. Those ones we're talking about, I can say it anywhere. They are not journalists. There are some people who get crushed.
But are they well paid? Nigerian journalists.
Our welfare is not what we expect.
It's not handsome.
Yes, it's not good enough. Yes, it's not good enough.
And what are we doing about it? What are you doing about it as the president?
A lot. Nigeria, you don't have journalists. You see, we have entered into negotiations with some media organizations on. Okay, some of them are not paying regularly. Why? We found out from them why. Some of them due to bad management. And we told them, you can't do this. So we have forced some of them to be paying. And that's a fact. I won't mention names. We have forced them to be paying, even to the extent of taking ourselves to the Ministry of Labour.
All right, let me go to Mr. Christian quickly, because time is not on our side.
I just want to quickly, I don't know if I should talk about the remuneration and the performance of the journalists. I align with him on one hand that the true Nigerian journalist, well trained, would not exhibit, a form of bias because of his poor remuneration at all in the discharge of his or her duty. But be that as it may, there is a problem, particularly in the print media, of regulation. I think the NPC, the Nigerian Press Council law, has to be overhauled. Anybody who has money can jump into that profession. You get the point, and become a publisher, an editor-in-chief, and the rest. You can't do that with the Nigerian Medical Association. Sorry, Mr. President.
All right, we're running out of time, and there's an important question that I must ask, because we're talking about the issue of unity at this time in Nigeria, and you know the role of journalists. Sometimes there are certain reports we write, and we can cause confusion across the country. What should be the role of the Nigerian journalists in this era of talking about peace and unity? Briefly.
It's a simple thing. We should be mindful of the consequences of our reports. Once we do that, we will be more restrained in going forward, because every story, every news broadcast has some consequence, and we need to be very, very careful, especially at this time that Nigeria is on the edge. We shouldn't do anything because we want to report. Like I always say, we should not talk ourselves into crisis or write ourselves into crisis. Nigeria, we are Nigerian journalists because there's a country called Nigeria.
All right, let me go to Mr. Chris briefly.
I think the issue of fairness, balance, objectivity must always come to play. What's the essence, of the profession? Is to continually unite the nation, is to discard the ills of society. It is to promote oneness, to promote our culture, to promote excellence in the society.
All right, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for coming into our studios. We have been looking at the issue of Nigerian media and objective reporting on Nigeria today. And I've been speaking with the National President of the Nigerian Union of Journalists, Mr. Abdulwahid Odushile, and Mr. Christian Ogodo, a broadcast journalist. Thank you very much for joining us on this edition of the program. Join us tomorrow for a fresh edition. I am Joy Oseagu.